All right, welcome everyone to episode 2. Hopefully this time with working audio. The last episode was just a test run. I'm going to keep an eye on my chat. I'm going to keep an eye on both YouTube and Periscope. Try to make sure that everything's working all right. I would appreciate it if you let me know if there's any audio issues this time around. And in doing so, I'm going to start off with just a little bit of a test run, and it's going to tie into some discussion about artificial intelligence later on in tonight's episode. This is the Rockwell automation copy pasta. It's a whole bunch of techno mumbo jumbo that is beloved in a lot of engineering communities throughout the world. None of this is actually real, but it's a little bit humorous in it. It has a tie-in to something I want to talk about later on. So without any further ado, here is Rockwell Automation's Retro Encabulator. Here at Rockwell Automation's world headquarters, research has been proceeding to develop a line of operating excellence. With customer service as our primary focus, work has been proceeding on the crudely conceived idea of an instrument that would not only provide inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors, but would also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal grammeters. Such an instrument, comprised of Dodge gears and bearings, Reliance electric motors, Allen Bradley controls, and all monitored by Rockwell software, is Rockwell Automation's Retro Encabulator. Now, basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power being generated by the relative motion of conductors and fluxes, it's produced by the module interaction of magneto-reluctance and capacitive duractance. The original machine has a baseplate of prefabulated amulite, surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing, in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with the panametric fan. The lineup consisted of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted that the ambifascient lunar wane shaft, that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal Lotus O-deltoid type, placed in a panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator, every 7th conductor being connected by a non-reversible trimmy pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the grammeters. Moreover, wherever fluorescent score motion is required, it may also be employed in conjunction with a drawn reciprocation dingle arm to reduce sinusoidal deplanaration. The Retro Encabulator has now reached a high level of development, and it's being successfully used in the operation of Milford trinions. It's available soon wherever Rockwell Automation products are sold. Alright, so hopefully that all came through pretty well. Great. Thank you so much, Christine, for the wonderful feedback. Let's just go ahead and get started with episode 2 of the Daily Dividend. The Dividend after the inaugural episode where I talked about how technology was going to save us, how automation and artificial intelligence may actually be the pathway out of the hole, the mess that we find ourselves in, this eternal division. And immediately after making that episode, I went and watched The Social Dilemma with my girlfriend, who may or may not be in the chat right now, and was promptly extremely just crushed as I realized that many of the issues that we find ourselves in right now are actually probably the cause of artificial intelligence and technology itself. But because this is the only thing that I can cling on to in the given day and age for hope, just really put my heels in and say, actually, yes, the way that we get ourselves out of this mess is through artificial intelligence, more artificial intelligence and technology. And I'm gonna give my case why. But undoubtedly, if you have not seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I highly recommend it. The only reason that I actually came around to watching it was because Andrew Yang tweeted about it. And, anything that Andrew Yang tweets about, I'm obviously going to take a look at. It was really eye-opening. I'm not going to lie, I've already seen Tristan Harris speak about this issue in many different formats. The Joe Rogan podcast, and I believe a couple of other instances he's come on to talk about the issue of how Silicon Valley is using artificial intelligence to kind of have a singular goal and purpose in mind, which is profit above all else. And a lot of the real-world consequences of that are plain to see, but we're misidentifying it. We're not actually seeing it. If you have not seen this, please go and take a look at it, unless you're really trying to keep yourself in a positive state of mind, in which case you should probably close this video altogether. Go outside, take a look at some green trees, feel the wind brush across your face and just take in the beautiful, wonderful reality of the world that you live in. There's no current existing format, platform, or any kind of technology that promotes you actually being involved and focused in on the beautiful, magnificent world that you find yourself in. And that is part and parcel of what the social dilemma was completely talking about altogether. You know, beauty is around us all of the time, but we are always existing within this system designed to take our attention for profit. One of the things that's spoken about in the social dilemma is that we have banned some forms of the market. We do not allow the harvesting of organs in a black market trade because we find that pretty morally, obtuse at the least, grossly disgusting at the most. And this current Silicon Valley business model exists to mine our attention, to mine our mental faculties, and to completely just exploit those 100%. And we don't get paid for the exploitation of our attention whatsoever, at least not in our current system. I find myself in a weird paradox after watching The Social Dilemma and after making my inaugural episode talking about how tech is actually going to save us, when I realize that I'm operating within this very system, and I've seen the ways in which I get more views based upon how clickbaity I make my title. I get more interactions based upon the direness of my message. The more that I'm able to convince you, my audience, my viewer, that the world is burning, the world is ending, or the only solutions that we have are completely unorthodox, crazy pie in the sky, I have to exaggerate most things. I have to blow everything out of proportion. I find myself at a crossroads thinking of how I want to influence and interact and bring positivity within the world, and how do I do that within a system designed to do the exact opposite. So today's show, obviously, we're kind of going over the core basics of the social dilemma, talking about artificial intelligence, talking about cryptocurrency, hopefully finding a way in which we could use technology to benefit ourselves, because the unfortunate truth is that we are already off of the deep end. The rabbit is out of the hat. What else would you say? The cat's out of the box, right? This thing is, the genie is out of the bottle. We are now snowballing down a hill, and we can't go back. We have to influence the path in which technology takes, and I can only hope that at least a few of you who follow me, at least a few of you who watch me can join along in my optimism and make good changes for the future. Okay, so enough rambling out of the way. I'm gonna begin the discussion of the social dilemma by bringing up the thought experiment of artificial intelligence known as the paperclip AI. You probably, if you're following me, know what it is, but you might not. And I can teach you something today. This thought experiment is around the idea of what's known as a narrow artificial intelligence, a AI that we have crafted that does not have full sentience. It's not able to take into contextual information and make a complete analysis of the world around it, but it's able to do things very, very well. Just like AlphaGo was able to play Go, the game like chess that they play a lot in China, extremely well. It could do that one thing perfectly, but if you asked it to find out the cure for cancer, it would have no place to start, no reference to start. Let's say that we had an artificial intelligence that was purely designed to create paperclips, and you designed this to say, I want you to efficiently create paperclips as perfectly as possible, and that's the only prompt that you give it, and it doesn't have any other reference as to how it should interact with the world. The very first thing that it's going to do is look at its immediate surroundings and start converting every single object, every single piece of metal into a paperclip. And eventually, as it gets better and better at creating paperclips, it's going to figure out that the medium of oxygen, the atmospheric pressure that it exists in, it actually slows it down to some degree. So it's going to devise a way to completely remove the Earth's atmosphere of oxygen altogether so that it can work at faster than sound speeds, or extremely lightning fast quick speeds. There's no ethical grounding in which this artificial intelligence exists. So it does not have the human condition in mind as it operates. What was so terrifying about watching The Social Dilemma is realizing that we have already crafted an artificial intelligence that lacks an ethical contextualization of the world around it. And what we've done is we've asked it, AI, I want you to efficiently gather the attention of every human being and keep it on a website longer so that we can sell them more ads. We can use that attention to garner more ad revenue. And by the end of The Social Dilemma, it becomes clear that right now we are already in this dystopian reality in which there's no evil person behind the wheel. There's no one pressing the buttons. I'm gonna bring up a pop culture piece of I'm just going to bring up some pop culture right now. It's Metal Gear Solid, a video game in which the core premise is like warfare. We're in a future in which war has become the primary economic currency. And by the end of the game, you kind of grow to realize that, all the soldiers have nanobots in their bloodstream. They can only use a specific gun that is measuring their fingertips. And they have no actual role within these wars except to act as economic actors within the much broader global economy, because you can make money by building bombs and having a place to drop them. You get to the end of the game and you realize that there's no final boss. It's all a machine. It's all a computer that's been running algorithms nonstop. It's just a mindless AI zombie that has a mandate to grow profit over time. It's effectively a cancer, right? A cell that multiplies, it mutates, and it will continue to grow until it kills everything in its path. So we have that right now. And that's what was so disturbing about watching this, and is why I tell you to hesitate before you go into it. Make sure you're in a little bit of a better frame of mind before watching it, because it does leave you with this pit of despair in your stomach, realizing that we have this mindless artificial intelligence that exists to gather the resource of human attention at all costs. Some of the situations that are portrayed is how it means to be a young girl growing up in a world in which you have complete access to social media, and that's your primary way of interacting with your peers. How are you supposed to live in a world that primarily sexualizes all aspects of the female identity and see that in the ways in which you're getting responses to when you take a Snapchat photograph and you use a filter, and it, just completely takes away all of the blemishes, all of the pimples, all of the normal aspects of being a grown human adult. You can suddenly take all of that away and project an image of yourself, which will undoubtedly do better in terms of likes and in terms of engagements from other people, because that's how the human attention span works. It's an incredibly awful realization to have, and what's more horrifying about it is that we don't know that it's happening, right? When I was in middle school, I got access to social media probably around 8th grade. I didn't have a smartphone, so I didn't have it at my fingertips all the time. But when I came home, the first thing I would do was log into Facebook, check in with all my friends, and I would post things and hope that people would like it. And I would absolutely be curating what I was saying, what I was talking about, to try and get the most social engagement from the people in my immediate surroundings in school. That was more than 10 years ago. I can only imagine what it's like to be growing up in that environment currently. And people who are already of adult age, the boomers, even the Gen X's, they don't have any kind of frame of understanding for what it means to be growing up in this type of environment. The technological progress is happening so fast that generational divides are making it harder and harder for us to relate and understand what's happening at a fundamental social level with one another. So how do we have that conversation? It's almost like, as The Social Dilemma was talking about this issue of a continuing fracturing of the ways in which we view our own lives and the ideologies of the people around us, because we're getting sucked into these echo chambers, that it was playing out before our very eyes in real life, in real time. For instance, I reach out to one of my family members and say, hey, I think it's very important that you watch The Social Dilemma. And the first thing they say is, well, I've just deleted Netflix because of the Cuties controversy. I guess I have to talk about that, don't I? I would like, for nothing else, for me not to have to talk about this subject, but I have to. Clearly, everything about Cuties makes me sick to my stomach. From the marketing, from the way that Netflix picked it up, from the way that it was quote-unquote shot and filmed. I haven't seen it, and I'm not going to watch it, which puts me at a disadvantage because I can't actually talk truthfully about it. But I feel like that's a consequence of filming it in the way that it was filmed. If the end result was to try and garner controversy, to try and garner outrage about a very real issue that exists in today's age, do you succeed in doing that by actually sexualizing minors, right? I feel like that's a valid criticism. I feel like it's a valid criticism to cancel a Netflix subscription based upon how they chose to market it. But more importantly than that, it's almost like, well, you have to imagine that there was an algorithm at play, that there was some sort of number crunching algorithm that said, hey, you're going to get a whole bunch more viewership or a whole bunch more engagement if you market this Cuties thing in this manner. It's extremely problematic because I can see both sides of the aisle. I can see the other side of the aisle in which there's a very real world that young women are growing up in, where they're mimicking the sexualized content that's put out just de facto in our society. Sex sells, and children mimic what they see. And we have to confront this issue in some way, because Cuties is bad enough as it is, but if we just disregard it completely, that's not going to deal with the fact that this type of thing is happening in social media as it exists. But of course, we saw the extreme rhetorics start to grow on social media, and then immediately it went to this cabal of pedophiles is taking over, and then also this is being hijacked by right-wing media, and it's being portrayed as something that it's not. Again, I'm not going to watch the thing because I don't have it within me to actually delve into that subject. It's awful. It's awful all around. Hopefully we can get to a point where we as a society can deal with issues like these without just completely devolving into absolute chaos. But look at what's happening right now. The West Coast is completely on fire. Portland, Oregon is up in flames, and you can't even get a consensus agreement on what the cause of this issue is. The left is despairing about climate change, and the right is talking about how anti-fascist perpetrators are actually causing the fires themselves, throwing Molotov cocktails and waiting for you to leave your home so that they can rob your house and take everything you own. It's bizarre to see all of this happening in real time, and to understand that at the end of the day, this is making Silicon Valley extremely wealthy. This is increasing the profit margin of the industry that is keeping our stock market afloat. What exactly can we do about this issue? Is it realistic for me to say, hey, possibly we can fix the incentive structure just by adding more technology, just by adding the proper reward system in place, or by adding the powerful enough artificial intelligence to deal with these issues? So that's the paradox. I'm making my show trying to guide people closer to a positive reality, but how do I do that? How do I make my show grow without keeping it in the same realm of all the other clickbait? If I don't drive outrage, if I don't keep your attention in a way that a different channel will keep your attention, if I don't compete in that way, then I'll fail. And I mean, I suppose that's okay, right? Like, at the end of the day, that's the meritocracy. But is the meritocracy grounded in a morally right environment, right? Like, that's the question. Could we have a meritocracy that existed in a different way? Or is capitalism just always going to fail in this end result, right? This is late stage capitalism, essentially. This is what it's going to devolve into. Because the attention economy isn't quite that new. The attention economy is advertising 101. You can have a business and you can say, we will do better to build a billboard outside of Detroit rather than Miami, just due to the demographics that exist there. We can reach this audience with this message a little bit better by putting our resources in this location. What we're seeing on social media, what we're seeing in the attention economy today, is just the extrapolation, many degrees down, of that business model. That's kind of the issue. When people say this is late stage capitalism, they're saying capitalism has kind of worked alongside, parallel with the human condition, with what people need to thrive, until it just didn't. And now it's separating, and now it's causing actually some pretty severe issues. So what do we do? How do we fix that incentive structure? I spoke a little bit last week, Friday, I suppose it was, about the question of cryptocurrency. Is it possible that we could use cryptocurrency on social media to incentivize positive interactions between people? I talked about how I logged on to Reddit and I saw, these moons that I had got based upon some metric of karma that I had made on that subreddit during that month, and I could exchange those moons for positive interactions with one another person. Was I more incentivized to have positive interactions? Absolutely. Does that raise the question of, well, should people be kind of nudged along to be positive? Is that disingenuous? I think often of the excerpt from How to Win Friends and Influence People, the notion that Abraham Lincoln used to write extremely inflammatory letters to his enemies, the people, his political enemies or his war enemies. And Mary Trump would actually go out to the White House's mailbox and take the letters out before they could be sent to their intended recipients. And at the end of the day, Abraham Lincoln just had to vent. He just had to get that out of his system, but whether or not it actually reached the person that he was intending it for it to, it didn't matter. And if you're going to conduct yourself in a business fashion, you got to put all of your deeper monkey brain issues aside and be positive for the sake of being positive, even though you might not always want to be positive. This is why psychopaths are so efficient at what they do. This is why psychopaths, you're more likely to encounter a psychopath every step up a corporate ladder you get, because they thrive off of casting a mirror image, a projection of what they feel the normal human being wants to see in a person. They'll be able to flash a smile and just do everything they know that other people respond positively to, and they at the end of the day will succeed because they are manipulative at their baseline fashion. I do have to wonder. I consider myself more of a libertarian type, like more freedom is better, but I consider myself more on the left aspect of that 4-quadrant political compass, because I think we need to have a safety net, a safety floor, a universal basic income. But I've always kind of aligned myself on the line that like more self-expression is better. But if people just on the baseline happen to be more toxic on an anonymous sense, maybe we do need some type of overarching incentive structure to keep people in line, to keep people incentivized to have positive interactions. It's going to be opening up an entire can of worms, but I can't imagine that it could get much worse than it is right now. At the end of the social dilemma, it almost becomes clear that we are facing a civil war. We're facing societal collapse if we don't change something in the way that we're doing it. So if it comes down to the reality that you have to be positive with other people, and if you're negative and toxic, that you'll see a financial loss for doing so. It's too short-sighted, right? Because We're going to tie this into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency right now, and and think about the ways in which Bitcoin worked and then failed. We thought, okay, the massive issue when it comes to the financial system is that the banks own and control everything from a centralized point. They have too much power and too much leverage when it comes to the financial system. So how do we deal with this problem? Well, cryptocurrency comes in and says there's now a decentralized ledger where every single computer in this country has the ability to verify financial transactions between one party and another. You no longer need the banks. You no longer need this centralized power authority. And then what do we find? Well, that's now abused by China, who can create massive farms of Bitcoin mining capacities with just endless rows of computers that are mining all of the Bitcoin that they can, and they take control of the census capacity of the blockchain. So we see the ways in which if you have the money or if you have the resources, you can still overpower even a system that's meant to be decentralized. You want to try and make people have positive interactions on social media. Well, now think of the ways in which people who just have more resources, who just have more cryptocurrency, are able to use that to their leverage disproportionately. I can't quite put into words what I think that would look like, but I do think this is part of the problem with creating a new system, is that you have to think of all of the potentialities yet to come. This is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit excited about Ethereum, is it's the new iteration on, okay, well, let's just say that Bitcoin fails in X way. How do we fix that? Well, it's almost like sortition, which is the idea that in a government, the best way to govern is to take every single citizen and for a brief moment of time, make them a representative in the government, make them someone who has the ability to vote directly on any given public ordinance or law. If I was more learned on the subject of sortition, I would give a much more in detail talk about it. I would recommend that you check out some YouTube videos. I know there's some really great TED Talks on the question of sortition. It's Sortition, I believe, sortition. And Ethereum 2.0 seems to be working on the notion that, well, we're going to get away from the problem of centralized abuse by just taking every single node, every single computer that's running these hashing algorithms, and pick one at random. And in that way, it's impossible for you to game this system. But that's what was thought of Bitcoin when it was first made. It may take the next iteration of this technology to get it right, but I think that we're going to get it right eventually. So the problem is all things point currently to this problem being insurmountable, and this problem being exacerbated by AI and artificial intelligence. I was just reading a report the other day about GPT-3, which is the current iteration of the natural language processor that I am so hyped about. I didn't hear. Did you? Christine's saying she sneezed. Were you able to hear that from up here? GPT-3 is that... Oh, Lord, where was I? It's so powerful that it's able to mimic even people who are in the grave currently. You could take Edgar Allan Poe, feed it a quick sentence, and it can come out with a poem that sounds like it was made directly from Edgar Allan Poe. It's so good, actually, that it is able to take conspiracy theories and put them out there in such a way that it looks just like a 10-chain long with different anonymous commentators bringing up, let's take QAnon for example. It looks like a genuine conspiracy thread that you would find on a more degenerate corner of the internet. But that's the problem, is that people they'll find themselves going down these rabbit holes And I'll have to link the study, in fact, if y'all are interested at it at all, because it's so disturbing to see the ways in which, like, this is a field of attack. People know how to psychologically manipulate people into radicalizing them. I'm thinking right now of the individual in Portland, Oregon, who shot that Trump supporter and then later wound up dying himself from a gunshot inflicted on him by the police. You can go and like look at his Instagram and you can look at his social media and you can see him like slowly become radicalized. Like he's posting pictures of himself hiking out in the great outdoors. He's like a Denver resident. And then all of a sudden he slowly like starts to talk more and more about like Black Lives Matters. And then he's talking more about like the fascist police state. And the next thing you know, like he's traveling to Portland, Oregon to try and stand up to this fascist uprising that he sees happening. And well, we all know what happens after that. But it seems clear, first of all, that he was a mentally ill person. I think, you know, just like some people are more predisposed to diabetes, some people are more predisposed to psychological manipulation on the scale of the radicalization on social media that exists. But it was really troublesome to see GPT-3 perfectly imitate the radicalization techniques of like QAnon. Like you could ask it to impersonate QAnon and it would perfectly bam, 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 bam. You know, George Soros this and that, and then someone responds back with this, and it feels like genuine. And it's so disgusting and disturbing to me because I'm so interested in the way that this could bring us to utopia. This was a theme in The Social Dilemma. By the end of it, it was like we are so close to utopia, but we're also so close to collapse based on this technology. It's really problematic. If someone gets a hold of this with bad intentions, we have not done our due diligence in safeguarding the population against these types of psychological manipulations. So hopefully it doesn't just come out like that. Hopefully we have something powerful enough to counteract it. But at the moment, that is an existing threat. But on the flip side, we could use this to greatly benefit humanity. Hopefully. Maybe in conjunction with a shift in financial incentives with cryptocurrency. Maybe in conjunction with a universal basic income, something that would help de-stress people on a national scale. I don't know. I'm thinking about this, and this will be a theme from episodes to come. I'll be asking the visitors that I get. I'm gonna have the Mayank gang, I believe it's the correct pronunciation, on in a couple of episodes, and I intend to ask them, some very intelligent individuals, about what they think of all these technologies coming down the road. But, you know, the initial Rockwell automation prompt that I had spoken about is going to tie in here at the very end, because you're able to ask this artificial intelligence, GPT-3, to do the opposite of something you may see on this subreddit, Explain Like I'm 5. You take a highly advanced topic, something like astrophysics, and you ask it to explain like I am a 5-year-old. And it would be able to, this artificial intelligence should be able to take it and dumb it down. But it can also do the reverse. And on this prompt here, I was just endlessly fascinated and just bemused and bewildered by what this came up with. It was asking it to, in the toughest way possible, make something simple sound super professional, super out of this world. I'm going to find it here. Super overcomplicated. I'm going to be talking about the prompt that was written by the human, and then I'll tell you when the artificial intelligence comes in. Again, this is just a natural language processor. It's a text predictor. It's thinking about what you want it to say and coming up with the next word. It just so happens that this iteration of it is so powerful that it's making extremely proficient results. So in the black here, the human says, the human asks the AI to make a simple description more complicated. The AI responds by writing a verbose response full of jargon to explain a simple concept. The human, Explain how to drink. Explain how to use a drinking fountain. Everything that you hear from this point on is a artificial intelligence. The AI. To activate the mechanized dihydrogen monoxide dispensary service station, use the flanges to provide a downward force to the simple circular activation console and continue to apply force until the mnemonic system begins operating as intended, which can be surmised at a time when the dihydrogen monoxide travels in a parabolic arc, which is at greatest exceeds 3 inches from the rounded excess liquid receptacle. Once hydration is completed, cease applying force to the console and regard whether or not the dispensary has ceased expelling contents as expected. So that was all written by an AI, just given the prompt that I explained earlier on. It is amazing to me that it's that good. That is pure creativity in my mind. That's something that you would read in a book and expect only from a human being. Here's another example. The human prompt says, "Human, explain how to play with a dog." And this is all artificial intelligence here. AI, being a typical domesticated animal, having been genetically selected for controllability, trainability, and general anthropomorphic features and functions, the typical dog possesses highly specialized and developed feeding behavior. The typical feeding behavior involves routine sustenance intake, which can be observed by monitoring changes in animal size. Routine sustenance intake involves active and passive feeding habits, and one can gauge animal health by observing the relative levels of hydration. During training, reward-conditioned reinforcement is applied. This involves the practice of rewarding targeted behaviors through the application of reinforcers, with the provision that the targeted behavior is observed. Relevant to the discussion at hand is the typical active and passive behavior exhibited by a typical dog. Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. There's one more here. The AI prompt simply says, "Human, explain how to walk." AI. All AI here. The typical human locomotion follows a cyclical gait pattern, and in ideal situations is self-propagating and requires no other source of power. In other circumstances, the typical human locomotion can involve the use of extroceptive for surfaces, and therefore does not qualify as self-propagating. The typical human locomotion is composed of 4 distinct stages. From left to right, the trip cycle, the stance cycle, the swing phase, and the lift-off phase. The typical human locomotion can be classified as non-directional. Directionality is applied by a typical human by modulating the vector sum of the internal body forces in the x, y, and z directions. The human's typical locomotion is highly specialized, highly efficient method of travel and is therefore common throughout the natural world. In many animals, the locomotion of a typical human is more advanced than in the typical human and can often lead to the conclusion that and it stops at that point. So he used the initial prompt. The human asks the AI to make a simple description more complicated. And what you see happen here at the very end is that it starts to fall apart. One of the shortfalls of GPT-3 is it has no memory. It has no long-term memory. It can only perform so well up to a point in which it starts to just kind of degrade. So I spoke a little bit about programming by prompt in the last episode, and it's something I'll bring up again, but part of what's so important when it comes to coding with GPT-3, with this artificial intelligence, is having the correct dialogue with it. It is an endlessly fascinating subject that I'm going to go much more in detail with in the future, but this is just so mind-boggling to me. This is wholesome in my mind, and I hate that the flip side of this coin is the Centers for Terrorism study coming out about how radicalization could be greatly augmented by this AI, right? With every single technology, there exists the great responsibility, the awesome power, the awesome destructive capabilities. We could use this to better humankind. I'm wondering if it's just the incentive structure. If we can fix our financial system, if we can fix our markets, would that be enough? Or is evil always just going to be existent? And will bad actors always just use the technology available to them to create bad outcomes? And that's probably the case. Can we use the technology to counteract that? I don't know, it's happening so fast that, and our politicians are so old. I don't have anything against old people, but let's face it, they have no idea what's coming down the pipeline. And in the social dilemma, there's a moment in which Tristan Harris is testifying to Congress, and the congressperson, or senator, I forget exactly who it was, comes back and says, you know, I'm 72 years old, and this is scaring the absolute hell out of me. I'm going to be long dead before this really kicks into gear, but... And he said that almost like as if it was a cop-out, as if he didn't have responsibility to deal with the implications of this technology today. It's mind-boggling to me. It's tragic. These politicians exist in a system that's self-propagating, based on money. They get in, they shake hands, they're re-elected, they have more money, they're re-elected. And they're dealing with a exponential technology that is rapidly changing everything about our society. We don't let advertisers take advantage of the attention of young children on a Saturday morning cartoon show. But all that flew out of the window once Silicon Valley kicked in gear and social media became a thing. It's moving so fast that we can't keep up with it. And even bringing up all of the problems, me on my talk show, that's not going to change much. It's almost like we have to strap in for the ride and hope that it goes well. Hope that light wins out over darkness. I'm trying to get in my... I think that's going to do it for today's episode. This is going to really be informing most of the conversations that I have in the immediate episodes to come. This is the daily dividend, but I should say it's the almost daily dividend, because Lord knows it's going to be hard to keep up with this on a day-to-day basis. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do this around this time frame every night, around 7 to 8 p.m. If you guys are looking forward to it, please make sure that you like the channel, subscribe. I'm going to do everything I can not to do clickbait. I don't care if I get thousands of views, but I do hope that I can help sway the discussion into a more positive outlet. A huge, huge thanks to the audience members who have helped me out and supported my show and have resonated with the vision and all the talks that I've had. You know who you are. I'm so blessed to have that kind of feedback. And you guys are awesome. I think about you every single day. And I hope that everyone, whether you've been a supporter of the channel or not, take some time tonight, tomorrow, or the next day, start to work on this, go out into the world, breathe in some air, look at some green, unless you're in California or Portland and it's super smoggy right now. Probably better for you to stay indoors with some good ventilation. And I'm sorry, it sucks. Deep breaths. We're all going to make it through it. Thank you for tuning in for tonight's show. I'm going to catch you guys tomorrow, hopefully. Good night.